All right, guys. So once again, we got to talk about Black Lives Matter, New York City co-chapter founder Hawk Newsome, who is back in the news because he has said something extremely controversial on TV, particularly Fox News, right? This guy loves going on Fox News and saying very, very, very provocative things. And this time, this guy actually went on Fox News and called Mayor Eric Adams a racial slur on live TV because Mayor Eric Adams called out Black Lives Matter on their silence anytime a black person is killed by another black person, right? But, you know, every time a black person is killed by the hands of a white police officer, they're out here protesting and rioting in the streets like white police officers are committing a genocide against black men, which is just entirely untrue. Right, so Mayor Eric Adams is calling that out. Hawk Newsome didn't like that, and he basically went all in on Eric Adams in this explosive interview on Fox News that I want to talk about. But before I get in that, I just want to let you guys know, if you like my channel and you want to support my channel, you can do so using the links in the description below. You can support the Patreon, you can support the PayPal, you can support the merch. There are multiple ways to support the channel if you would like to do so. So with that being said, let's go ahead and play this clip of Hawk Newsome going off on Eric Adams for calling out Black Lives Matter. Take a look.
This spike in the murders of African Americans. FBI data showing a 32% increase from 2019 to 2020. And a 43% surge in 2020 compared to the previous decade. All this when the defund movement took off. Fox News Digital reaching out to BLM about the numbers last week, not yet receiving a response. We will, however, get one now from Hawk Newsome, co-founder of BLM of Greater New York. Hawk, nice to see you. Nice to meet you in person. Couple things to go over. That defund question in a second here, but listen to the Mayor Eric Adams who said this just this past week also.
Where are all those who stated Black Lives Matter? If Black Lives Matters, then the thousands of people I saw on the street when Floyd was murdered should be on the street right now stating that the lives of these black children that are dying every night matters. We can't be hypocrites.
The subject is African Americans. I would also argue white lives matter too. Everybody's life matters here. What the mayor contends, though, is that the same reaction is not given. What would you say to him?
It was smooth the way you threw White Lives Matter in there. Our problem is when black lives are oppressed and don't receive justice, nobody cares. Nothing happens. Something happens to a white person, the world moves, right? So let's get back to Eric Adams. This mayor who is a Democrat, but he spews conservative and Republican talking points. At the end of the day, we have a name for someone like this, and this is someone we call a right? Because of he's black man, and he's a white man in blackface, and a very conservative-minded white man at that. So what we have is a man with hundreds of people on the city's payroll, billions of dollars in budget, and 40,000 police officers. He has 10 victims in one night. The night before, he had 16 shooting victims on a train. And they say, what are you going to do about policing? And he says, what about BLM? Is America not smart enough to see him deflecting? Like,
well, that might be the case. I didn't see the entirety of the interview, but there's a ton of topics to discuss with him. He was with us last week, and what he told Dane and me is that we'll continue to take guns off the street, whether it's white, black, or whatever the category you want to put it in, and that dangerous people will not be a part of the revolving door system, the legal system in New York. To that, you would say. Now,
here's the thing, man. You're smarter than this. Don't listen to what Eric Adams says. He gives great press statements. He's the master of the press conference. Some kid dies, he hugs their mother, he's holding up sneakers, he's crying. But what we elected him for, the city of New York, was to keep the city safe. This city is a war zone, and he can't stop it. So with all his power, he turns to BLM and says, what are you going to do? Well, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to organize people in our communities to go out and preach a message of love and unification in the streets. We're going to take control of our cities because the government has failed us for decades. Even when crime is low, we're still dying. And we have to fix this problem ourselves because we believe that poverty is the mother of crime. And until we fix that, there'll never be a decrease in crime.
Yeah. So that guy he just unloaded on Eric Adams and called him all types of racial slurs under the sun. Okay, now the racial slur that he called Eric Adams was the C word. You know, the word that people who can't think critically use to describe people, black people who do think critically, right? Who don't till the Democrat plantation. That's the word that he used. Okay, now the problem here is this. Eric Adams, yes, he is deflecting when he calls out BLM, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's wrong. He actually is right, because what he's saying at his core is that these communities, ultimately, at the end of the day, they have to police themselves, right? And it starts in the household. It starts with keeping these kids off the streets and not involved in these gangs and these illegal activities that contribute to violence. Okay, he's preaching a message of personal responsibility. He's saying that if these same people who protest over a white police officer killing a black man, 99% of the time is justified, but if these people protested about a black man killing another black man, which is overwhelmingly, right, the biggest threat to black life, then maybe we would see some change, right? Maybe some of the change doesn't necessarily need to be government centered. Okay, which that is what increase in police is. That's a government thing, right? Maybe it needs to be within the communities themselves, which ultimately is what Hawk Newsome said at the end of that clip, right? He ultimately said that the change that actually needs to occur is within the communities themselves. So you're not really disagreeing with the guy. You just don't like the fact that he called out BLM on their hypocrisy, right? And what really kills me about this is that this guy has to stoop as low as to racialize his rhetoric. And it's so disgusting because, first of all, he got triggered by the fact that, you know, the host there said, you know, white lives matter as well, too. Okay, he got triggered by that. And then on top of that, it's like, dude, you're calling the man a racial slur and saying that he's a white man in blackface simply because, one, he disagrees with you, and two, he's preaching a message of personal responsibility. Right? Every time somebody preaches a message of personal responsibility, for whatever reason, they associate that with the white man. You want people to hold each other accountable? Boy, you sound like a white man. Okay, that's literally what these people say. All the good traits in society that you need to be a successful and productive citizen in society, they assign to white people. And they do it subconsciously, and they don't even understand it. Because again, what Eric Adams was saying was just simply black people got to hold each other accountable. Right? The same way that these people hold the white police officer accountable when they kill a black person in a situation they feel is unjust. You gotta hold the black man that goes out here and kills another black man accountable the same way. Okay, that's all he's saying. But apparently that's Tom talk, right? That's Tom talk, according to these guys, right? And the sad part about this, guys, is that because he talks like this, because everything to him is so racialized, and all his rhetoric is so radical and racist, people tune him out. And they're not actually listening to the things he's saying, because some of the things he's saying actually has some merit to it. He actually does have some rational ideas and things that he's putting out there, but nobody's ever going to listen to that because it's clouded by all this radical, racist, hateful rhetoric. For example, I want you guys to listen to this clip right here in this interview, in which he actually does sound reasonable on some of these issues. Take a look.
Maybe the cops are good for the community to help keep them safe. Why don't you buy that argument?
Here's the problem. Because the cops are not the answer. Poor people commit crimes out of desperation. Address the poverty. The Republicans don't care. But they'll say, we'll teach you. They'll say, we'll teach you to empower yourselves. Democrats want to keep us handicapped and crippled and on welfare, right? But instead of giving us the answer to our problems, is there a reason why high school students in the South Bronx drop out at a 60% rate? Our schools are failing. You want to end crime? Give the kids programs. And for God's sake, I just want to get this little housing tidbit in. Our governor, Hochul, took money away from NYCHA, public housing, and gave that money to the Buffalo Bills.
Yep.
Right? Her husband owns the concessions at the stadium. I talked to you about Black Lives Matter New York. We have a beautiful Montessori school in the Bronx that no press will cover. People say that Black Lives Matter has been silent on murders. I call the news every time we give out toys, every time we do peace walks, every time we give out turkeys, every time we do something wholesome and uplifting, like Juneteenth festivals in the community. The news doesn't come to cover it.
We'll give our word that we'll come and see this.
That's right. You're going to come Juneteenth. You're going to hang out in the Bronx.
You come back here.
Just don't wear like a dashiki like Pelosi and them.
Don't worry.
You can give me fashion advice before I Thank you so much.
All right, guys. So as you heard there, and I'm going to have to use some nuance here, okay? Because I don't necessarily agree with what he's saying, but I agree with half of what he's saying when it comes to some of the things he just said there, okay? What he's basically saying is that we don't need the police, okay? What we need is economic opportunity and investment, right? If you solve the economics, then crime will solve itself. Now, here's the problem, right? I think that half of what he's saying there is true, okay? But also, I think what he's missing is that without police and safe neighborhoods, it is hard to generate economic activity in communities because your communities aren't safe, okay? And this is evidenced by what happened with New York in the 90s, okay? During the 90s, under Mayor Giuliani, violent crime in New York decreased by more than 56% compared to 28% for the rest of the nation as a whole. Property crimes tumbled by 65%, but they only fell 26% nationally. Now, a lot of this stuff has been attributed to, again, Mayor Giuliani getting tough on crime as he increased the police force of New York City by 35%, and the number of prison inmates rose by 24%. So there were more arrests, there were more police, they were locking people up, they were charging people, and crime declined. Okay, that's what happened. Now, what also happened at the same time in New York that people contribute to the decrease in crime as well too, is that New York during the 90s had an economic boom, okay, where unemployment declined, there was an increase in the minimum wage, and again, crime dropped alongside that as well too, right? So you know what they had at the same time? They had more policing, okay, and they had an economic boom. So you need both, right? You need both. And this is what that guy is missing, okay? And this is what I've been arguing for a long time. You know, I definitely do think that crime, some of it is a function of poverty. Some of it is a function of culture, okay, that glorifies crime and violence. But at the end of the day, you can't have economic opportunity in a community that is unsafe, okay? And that's my biggest problem with the defund the police people, okay? They want to talk about, well, take the police away, take the funding away, and put the funding in the communities, and magically the communities are going to be safe. Because, oh, well, the communities have funding and they have money. Well, it doesn't matter how much money you throw at these communities. If you still have illegal activity, gangs, drugs, violence going on in those communities, and nobody's policing those communities, nobody's taking the criminals off the street, no businesses are going to invest in those communities, right? You're not going to bring any economic opportunity into the communities. You're going to be wasting money. That's what's going to happen. But for whatever reason, the defunded police people, they don't understand that you need both, right? You need a safe environment for businesses to be able to operate. You know, if you listen to what this guy was saying there at the end, you know, he was asked about BLM and the mansions and stuff, and he was like, hey, you know, I really don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about what my chapter is doing. You know, we're doing this, we're doing that. The media doesn't cover it, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. They typically don't cover when, you know, these people do good things. And I'm pretty sure they are doing good things in the community. But the problem is that you're making your organization seem less credible when you go out here and you spew this radical racial rhetoric that simply just divides people. People are going to automatically think, okay, this guy's racist. He's a radical. It doesn't matter what he says because he obviously has a hate for people that don't look like him. People aren't going to find you credible, even though you may be doing good things, even though your heart might be in the right place. They also aren't going to find you credible when you come out here and you call for violence and bloodshed in the streets if you don't get your way, right? Just because Eric Adams is like, we're going to bring back a certain unit of the police force, okay? If a lot of these people turn down the radical rhetoric, I guarantee you people would be more willing to listen to them because there are parts of the interview in which the guy was saying things that made sense, okay? Even though I don't necessarily agree with it, it made sense, okay? But hey, you know, Eric Adams did get caught on tape calling white police officers, you know, racial slurs, the C word, that's derogatory towards white folks. So, hey, I mean, maybe this is a what comes around goes around thing. And again, I find it hilarious because it seems like the people in this country that are using racial slurs the most are people that claim to be fighting against racism, okay? And people who happen to not be white, right? They're the ones that are using these racial slurs the most. Ain't it funny how that works? But let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.